Hello, and welcome to the #StoryFirst podcast, a weekly show where we talk about Web3 NFT projects focused on storytelling. We believe story-focused NFT projects are built to last and will form the foundation of a new breed of hugely influential properties in gaming, entertainment, art, and beyond. The StoryFirst podcast highlights the mavericks and leaders who are leveraging the power of NFTs to tell the blockbuster stories of tomorrow. My name is Devin Sawyer, and I am joined by my esteemed co-host and co-founder, James Deverin.
Hi guys, my name's James. I'm the art director of and founding member at Legends of Cypher, and I'm a member of StoryPrimaDAO.
Yes, together we represent half of the founders at StoryPrima, which is a decentralized autonomous organization with a mission to accelerate the growth and success of story-focused NFT projects through media, research, education, and project incubation. Today on StoryFirst, we're honored to welcome Doug Thompson from the Echocore community. We're honored to host this podcast because Echocore is a really great story, a really great example of deep lore storytelling in Web3 and leveraging NFT technologies. But even cooler is the fact that Doug is a Metaverse OG, going back a number of years. And today we're really excited to learn more about the history of the Metaverse, the relevant market conditions for today, and where we see it going in the future. So Doug, welcome and thank you for your time and joining us today on the podcast.
This is amazing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good to see Doug, you both.
Yeah, amazing. And you've got a beautiful and serene background. And disclaimer to the audience, minor technical difficulties today. So if things are a little bit jittery, bear with us. So Doug, let's get right into it. Let's start with you. Tell us about yourself, your origin story.
Well, how about where I've ended up, which might explain some of the jitteriness today. So I'm in Formentera, which is a little island south of Ibiza in Spain, in the Mediterranean. It's been beautifully sunny here. And my Wi-Fi is some kind of weird contraption on the roof of this villa thing that I'm staying in. And who would have imagined, like 4 or 5 years ago even, being a digital nomad? And for a lot of people, the idea was like totally crazy. But I've actually been a nomad for a few years now. And it kind of speaks a little bit to what I think the life in the metaverse is going to be like. And what's interesting about the last year or so, especially since Facebook announced it was going big on the metaverse, what I think is interesting about the last year and the difference to 15 years ago. 15 years ago, we were super concerned about the tech. It was all about figuring out interoperability, how to get my avatar to move from one world to another world. And we just thought that if we could solve the tech problem, everything would be, the metaverse would emerge. And I think what's interesting about the last year is that we've seen that this is just as much about culture. The metaverse is as much about a cultural space. And I've always been a believer that story is the most powerful communicator of culture. So it's kind of an exciting time. It's the convergence of story all coming together to open up this new era.
Yeah, definitely. We did lose you on a couple of spots there. So let me just try and recap what we caught. It sounds like you're building metaverse technology that enables significant collaboration and experiences. We missed you. We caught a bit about the military. Can you talk a little bit about that program as an example?
Yeah. So about 15 years ago, I was working with the U.S. military to help veterans coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq to recover from military amputees. They were called military amputees. So these were, people who had amputations because of war. And we used the metaverse as a source for telling a story. We actually created this virtual place. It was it was modeled after in a old camp in the Carolinas, and it was this place, and they could have a peer support group together. They could attend, therapy sessions and things like that. So it was this combination of letting people express their bodies through avatars, which was super important for this group of veterans, a source for socializing and a source for storytelling.
Amazing. And so, these experiences you've had have kind of given you the background and understanding, and you talk about the metaverse being kind of a cultural phenomenon. So grounded in today, what are some of the examples that you're seeing in Web3 that are enabling the metaverse to be a reality today versus kind of the burgeoning start of it 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about what the metaverse involved in something called the Open Meta DAO. It's a DAO that's devoted to making sure that the meta is open to companies. And one of the things that we say at Open Meta, and that Ryan says, is that the metaverse is the internet built by game developers. So it's a spatial experience, it feels like a place. But if you think about the metaverse and what the things are that are needed in the metaverse, there are things like identity, which I can express through an avatar, right? You need a wallet, you need inventory, you need friends. And I would propose that with Web3, a lot of the infrastructure for the metaverse is being built even before the 3D spaces are necessarily there, which I find super interesting. And a lot of this has started with profile photos. And of course, the most famous example is probably the Bored Apes, right? My identity, I have my wallet, my MetaMask wallet. So I'm building out this infrastructure for all the things I'm going to need once I enter that 3D space that we call the metaverse. So I think it's kind of an interesting time because it's a cultural phenomenon that's happening. It's a cultural movement that's putting, that's creating the conditions for the next generation of online experiences.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I remember when we were talking, because, when you think of identity and wallet, and then, the way the community comes together around cryptocurrency, decentralized autonomous organizations, it's very much community-based collaboration. And I believe you mentioned when we spoke that you were quite interested back in the early days about the economics. And that would have been really pre-cryptocurrency. You hosted a show called Meta Economics. Can you share a little insight about what that was about? Because that's certainly as OG as it gets.
Yeah, yeah. It was a show. It was called Metanomics. It was was hosted by a professor at Cornell University, who was actually a professor of accounting, and he was fascinated by game economies, and so he and I produced the show, and I sometimes hosted it, and we had guests on that included, Noam Chomsky, the head of the World Bank, senior executives at Microsoft, Jesse Schell, all these kind of different disciplines that were interested in these emerging game worlds. And, back in the day, like World of Warcraft, did either of you guys ever play World of Warcraft?
I didn't know.
Oh my God.
No, I haven't played it either.
Because back in the day, oh man, you missed the glory days. Because back in the day, World of Warcraft, people were like, wow, this is a huge economy. Hundreds of millions of dollars of value was being exchanged in World of Warcraft. And there were factories in China with people on computers farming for gear and farming for gold and stuff like that in World of Warcraft. And people suddenly realized that these game worlds were creating these really huge economies. And so people started writing about what's going to happen if the virtual economy starts to become big enough that it may threaten the real world economy. And so there was this huge interest and a lot of academic study in how these game worlds were creating their own alternative economies. And of course, now Jensen Huang at NVIDIA says that the metaverse economy will probably exceed global GDP, which is crazy. So Metanomics was based on the idea that the metaverse isn't just a game world, that it's going to involve all kinds of different disciplines, from storytellers to architects, musicians and artists to gamers. And so we ran that show for, I guess we probably had 100 episodes similar to this show, just meeting with really cool people and talking about where all of this stuff is going. And that was 15 years ago. And it's, I could probably take the show list, and if we did that shows today, it would still be relevant.
Yeah, true. Is that something you could pull out of the archives? Just curious.
Yeah, I've been trying to get it. I think it's actually trapped on iTunes. Right, and I have to untrap it because this is an old email that I don't have access to anymore.
Right.
I was having this conversation with my friend earlier, and it was kind of like an argument. Okay, he doesn't believe that the metaverse is going to catch on, and I was giving him all these reasons why it's going to, just as you say, exceed global GDP. Okay, and here are a couple of my ideas, and see if you can riff with this. The world is fascinated by continual growth. Okay, but we know that with expanding population, continual growth, exponential growth just isn't possible. Okay, so what we need to move into is a world where you can grow and expand and increase as much as you possibly want to, but it doesn't use physical land and it doesn't use natural resources. And I put forward this proposition that the metaverse would be exactly the sort of place where this could happen, and people could unleash their creativity, and AI could go wild and generate billions and billions of different landscapes for people to exist in, and clothing for them to wear, and items for them to have, and houses for them to live in, without inflicting our presence upon our environment any more than we are doing so already. But my friend was determined that people would not unhinge themselves from reality to that degree. They wouldn't live their lives in the metaverse, not 100%, not 90%, not 80%. He said, maybe 20%, maybe like you scroll through Facebook or Instagram. What do you think? Do you think we could see a 50 or above percentage life spent in the metaverse? And if so, what would technology need to do in order to get us there? Are we going to be head to toe in visors and suits? Are we going to be complete immersion? Or is it going to be something that we're more familiar with, like on our phone or on our TV screen, or maybe just in the bottom layer of our glasses? What do you think?
So the question was whether we'd spend all of our time in the metaverse. And certainly it's sort of a dystopian idea, isn't it? This idea that it's going to be better to just log in, have a nice beach house, do fun stuff in a digital world rather than a physical one. And there's something dystopian about that. And look, I'm a digital nomad, and I like experiencing different places and different tastes and different smells and sounds and so on. So actually, I'm kind of hopeful that we don't all end up logged in to the metaverse. That's the dystopian version of how this turns out. It's Ready Player One, isn't it? It's where they put their goggles on to enter, what's it called? To enter the oasis, because reality is so crappy. And hopefully that's not how it turns out. But there's an interesting point here, which is, where do you define where the metaverse begins? And one of the kind of leading lines of thinking about the metaverse is that it's the final blending of physical and digital realities. And it means that as I'm wearing glasses and walking down the street itself can become a process of walking in through the metaverse, or the physical world version of the metaverse. So I kind of have this concept that our experience of the metaverse will be variable, meaning that sometimes we'll just engage with a tiny little bit of spatial content, a tiny little bit of 3D content. And sometimes I will log in because I'm going to, a Dead Mouse concert. Sometimes I'm logging in because I'm, building stuff in the equivalent of something like Fortnite Creative. So I actually think we will be spending over 50% of our time engaged with the metaverse, but that won't always look like we expect it to. Like, it won't always be logging in to the full experience. That sometimes the metaverse will just kind of be around us in a more ambient way.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. A set of varifocals for the lower half is metaverse, and the upper half keeps you on the right track on the sidewalk. And I imagine visiting stores for clothes shopping, physical stores that are smaller than they currently are, but have the capacity for you to browse a limitless inventory of items that are made to order, and items that are available for your meta avatar as well. I think that it's hard to imagine, just like the transition between physical store places and internet store places was hard to imagine. I think it's the same sort of thing. It's difficult for us to see it now, but in what's the time horizon? 5 years time? 10 years time?
Yeah, I would say in 5 years they're predicting you'll be able to wear glasses that will be able to seamlessly switch between VR, fully closed off virtual reality, and AR, so that these are glasses. And you saw that actually today. Meta was demonstrating their new Cambria glasses, which are mixed reality VR goggles. So they're goggles that I can log into a fully immersive VR and then switch so that I could see the room around you. Now imagine as that gets miniaturized and I can actually wear those glasses throughout the day. It means I could actually be jump off into a virtual experience of some kind, let's say a game, and then I could transition back to the physical world seamlessly, and that would all happen on my glasses. And they're predicting that that'll happen within 5 years.
And I think that this really does allow us to push forward in certainly in developed worlds where there's a shortage of space. There's a shortage of prime real estate. On the main street, on the main economic area of any city, you could have layer upon layer upon layer of metaverse shops that you could browse and could be hosted by a whole different number of businesses. It gives equal opportunity to a wider variety of people without having to encroach into the physical world in order to do it,
Yeah, I have always been fascinated by the crossover between architecture and the metaverse. there's a fellow named John Bruchode, who I did work with about 15 years ago. He helped us to design these spaces that we used for veterans. And he was just so brilliant. And he had a project called reflective architecture, which was to create architecture in virtual environments where the architecture itself would change based on who the users were that were going through that space, based on how many people there were. So you could have a little seating area for 3 people, but then if 5 showed up, the space itself would transform. And but 15 years ago, this was like revolutionary. Recently, I've had the luck of getting to know Pico Velasquez, who is one of our advisors at Echocore, and she's an architect who's also bringing the architecture of the metaverse into the physical world and vice versa. And both of these architects sort of say the same thing, which is that you can no longer design physical space as I don't know, how do you put it? As something that's static. Like, I have to design physical space knowing that some people are going to be wearing, glasses, AR glasses, that the space itself can change. She's done physical spaces that change based on how many people are there. So that you've got this really interesting rethinking of physical reality, exactly what you're saying. That physical reality itself is now blending with digital, and that has implications for everything from farming to how we experience retail. So it's, wow. Kind of like, wow, we can't even imagine. We're at the very earliest days of imagining what this is going to look like.
That's it. It's so difficult to imagine. We're just going to have to see it play out.
Yeah. And if you're not following Doug on Twitter, at DusanWriter, DusanWriter, Doug's got lots of great content. Your blog there, was it Out of Scope? Yep. BureauofBrightIdeas.com. Absolutely worth checking out. Doug is a thought leader in the space, and we hope to get you back on the show. We could absolutely blow up tons of more time and conversation around the space. It seems endless, as it were, as the metaverse will be. But I do want to make sure we get into the Echocore project, because I think it's an important piece of the work you're doing. And to pivot that, I wanted to come back to something you said when we spoke last time, Doug, and that is you referred to the NFT as the atom in the Web3 space. Can we start there? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so typically in game environments, games are built up actually of, this is a vast oversimplification, but games are actually built up of little atoms. You take a square, or you take a cube, you take a sphere, you morph them, you change them, and then you can create a car. That's how a game is built. So I take a bunch of cubes and I can create a house, and then I can create a game, where my character moves through that house. So that's how games are built. They're built from the atom up. And I think what I started to see with NFTs, especially with profile photos to start, was that stories were being started with the absolute simplest pieces. It was just a profile photo of a bored ape. It was just a profile photo of a punk or whatever. So if that was true, then you start to ask yourself the question, well, what other elements do I need to make up a story? And it's really not that complicated. I have characters, which is the equivalent of a profile photo or an avatar. I have locations, and I like to think of locations like the Batcave or Superman's Fortress of Solitude. It's these iconic locations that stories take place in, or a tea house, or my living room, or a beach, where I meet somebody. And then there's objects, and those can be everything from a chair to a gun to a pet. So stories are made up of these little components, And then the only thing that's missing is our creativity to bring these elements together in order to create story. And what we're doing with Echocore, and I think more broadly, I think what all of the Web3 storytellers are doing is experimenting with this idea that we could take components and reconfigure them in interesting ways because of the capacity of the blockchain, and that you can then attach those composable pieces, you can attach them to some kind of economic system, not necessarily because we all want to get rich, but just because you have this out of the box incentive system, which I think is super intriguing and has not really been available online until now, right? So it was very difficult to make money, let's say, as a blogger. I wrote about 700,000 words on the Metaverse on my previous blog, and there was no way for somebody to tip me, right? There was no way to really make money off of those blog posts unless I threw up ads. And yet what Web3 and what the blockchain is giving us is this opportunity to show our appreciation to each other for the stories that we tell, for the content that we create, for the experiences that we provide. So that's what I meant by, I think we've got these new prims, we've got these new atoms. NFTs represent storytelling atoms. And if I put those atoms together, I can create larger and larger story structures.
Love it. And you also, I think one of the themes you keyed in on around that, that's part of your vision, is the interoperability that, an NFT at its core could provide. There's obviously still technical barriers to overcome, but in the blockchain, in Web3, if you will, the infrastructure is there that can enable it. So how do you see interoperability evolving to bring this kind of open metaverse idea to life?
Yeah, actually, so we just with my work with Open Meta, we actually just did the global first test of bringing avatars from 3 separate NFT collections into a single game space. And it's a super technical and super geeky. It has to do with how the joints and the avatar meshes, how you map them so that they're interoperable. So it meant that I could go into a game environment and I could easily switch between my different NFT collections. But let's talk about it as storytelling. And I think that this is similar to what we were just talking about with architecture. It's one of those mind-blowing thoughts, is when I play Call of Duty, it's a story about Call of Duty, and it has no application to what happens in Red Dead Redemption, right? Those story worlds don't merge. What's interesting, I think, about this next phase of the open metaverse and of storytelling is that I'm going to, let's say, as a Bored Ape owner, or because I love my MFer avatar, I want to take that avatar into multiple environments. And therefore, I want to be able to tell stories about that character in different environments. So I think what's interesting as storytellers is that this starts to mean that our stories will start to transcend the worlds. They won't always be contained to single worlds. And so the interoperable piece of this, I think, becomes, how do we make story itself, the components of story, the results of story, how do we make the story components interoperable across different worlds? And that's what we're trying to do with Echocore. So, for example, in Echocore, you can synchronize your brain to a quantum computer, right? That's the premise. That's the starting premise. And if you imagine that once you enter this quantum metaverse, we have partners. So, for example, Pixelinks is a partner of ours. And I want to be able to take my character and go from the Echocore world, and I want to go over and attend a Deadmau5 or Richie Houghton concert in the Pixelinks musical metaverse. So those activities are part of the experience, part of the story that I'm telling about myself and about my avatar and about my faction and about the places that I go. And I should be able to mint those stories. I should be able to capture them and have that contribute to the larger value of a story franchise. So it's a bit of a kind of a big picture thing, but it's really about extending the thoughts about interoperability to being more than just avatars, but that our stories that we tell, the stories that mean something to us, we want to make those stories interoperable.
This is no different from, although it's very different. It's no different at its core from what people do with their social media accounts at the moment. They take photographs to prove that they were somewhere, and they tell stories in short form about their lives. And what you're saying is that you're able to do that both in the real world and in hopefully in all realms of the metaverse, and you're able to mint these as NFTs on the blockchain. It's going to be a seamless transition, especially if people don't know that it is crypto based. If there's not a barrier to entry, and I imagine that the user experience will present no barrier by that point.
Yeah, that's absolutely, you're right. The part that I think is interesting though, and I think like Legends of Cypher, for example, is its own story world, right? It's its own franchise that is, owned by the people who are contributing to it. Similarly, you have Echocore, which is its own story franchise. So as I contribute to that story franchise, so it's not just necessarily about my own personal feed, but it's about my contribution to this bigger narrative franchise. And so why shouldn't I benefit from that, right? So I often use the example of Witcher. It was a great book, and then they turned it into a video game, and then there was a Netflix series made. But there's no back benefit to the players who play the video game from the fact that it's now a Netflix series. But shouldn't there be? I mean, I think there should be, because it's all part of one larger story. And I think that's the intriguing part here, is that as a fan or as a player, I am contributing to these big stories, whether it's Witcher, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto. I'm contributing to these story worlds. And what Web3 allows is for me as a player to actually benefit from the value that I bring in making that story franchise bigger.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, we certainly talk a lot about, don't like to use the term disruption, but it certainly is disruptive to the existing kind of big studio publication and distribution model, where the fans are the recipients of the content, and the early fans are really the ones that make it a reality and bring it to life, because it's their dime and time that allow these projects to grow. And yet the earliest fans get no benefit. I mean, obviously, you have if you have Spider-Man 1 or, early comics and things like that, collector items certainly gain value, but it's far from the sizable value of these franchises. And you see fan fiction kind of break off and become its own thing, but it creates the vastness of the storytelling, and the fan base grows, and yet there's no proper economic and incentive model to allow the real creative storytelling. So it sounds like us, with the way we think about Legends of Cypher as an opportunity to be a community storytelling, sounds like you and Echocore believe the similar thing, in that, a story can be told by community, a fan base can create the universe together through participation, not only in reading, viewing, watching, but actually, getting involved from a community and economic incentive perspective. So yeah, love it.
Wouldn't it be great, like, for a young writer and they've got 4 or 5 stories that maybe they're kind of involved with, and that they can actually make a living because they're involved in these 4 or 5 story DAOs or projects without necessarily needing to apply for a job. Like, I don't need to go to Hollywood and get hired by the studio because the studio is now everybody. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, that's the dream to me.
Yeah,
that's the dream. I think of somebody, it's somebody who's like some 16-year-old who's posting stuff on DeviantArt. That's who we're after. Like those kids who are creating things on Roblox and maybe making a little bit of money. We want to be able to do the same thing for storytelling, whether that storytelling is visual or whether it's written. I think that's so exciting.
Yeah, love it. I think we're definitely aligned. So let's really drill down on Echocore. Tell us a little bit of the story, what it's about, and how someone in the Web3 community can get involved and be a participant, and what that experience is like at this point.
Ty is my co-founder. He's the guardian of the lore. And I was attracted to Echocore because of his storytelling. And it really tells the story of Ian Siddell, who is this kind of enigmatic, eccentric genius, but cool. Like, he's super hip. He grew up in San Francisco, kind of got into the raver scene in the late 90s, kind of that, 90s house music rave era. Loved skateboarding. That was his kind of escape. But he was, a genius when it came to technology, and he did kind of secret projects for the government for a while, and then decided to shift his energy to creating this Echocore device, which is a little machine that synchronizes your brain to a quantum computer so that you can enter a metaverse without a screen. Your brain, you just actually enter it through your brain. So that's where we're headed, is to recreate this quantum metaverse so that our players can enter it. We have a whole lore around the world and how the world was designed. There are some crises that happen, which I can't reveal just yet. So in order to tap into that, we started by releasing the device itself as an NFT. As if you're buying one of these little machines that synchronize your brain, you can buy one of these NFTs. If you have this NFT, it unlocks avatars, it unlocks a book that we're creating. So it's your all access pass if you buy a Genesis NFT. So that was the start, was the Genesis NFT. Again, it's an all access pass to the story. Our next step was a skateboard inspired by his Ian Siddell's childhood. So we're doing this really cool skateboard collection. We're going to do it it'll be cheap. And we're using it to promote storytelling in general. So we have a bunch of partner projects that are on board, including Legends of Cypher, I think. And then we have a graphic novel that we're in the process of writing and illustrating right now. And then the next one will be the Avatar drop. So lots of stuff coming. And if you want to kind of follow the story and contribute to it, you buy one of these Genesis NFTs, allows you to add to the story, which also allows you to earn returns as the story gets sold as NFTs.
Love it. And you see this evolution of the experience, the avatars in particular, kind of building toward this vision you have of the metaverse interoperability and.
Yeah, I mean, part of this connects back to my partnership and my work with Open Meta. They have a platform called Emergence, which is a kind of a techie thing, but it's a system for connecting to your wallet in games. And then we have a partnership with Pixelinks, which allows us to, out of the box, like as soon as we launch, will allow your avatar to be able to move freely between different worlds. And we talk to all kinds of projects, partly because of that's my background. And we're seeing the early signs of, kind of interoperability being top of mind. So that's exciting. I think we're all interested in an open metaverse. I want to be able to move between all of these different worlds that are coming out of Web3.
Amazing. Yeah, so for those watching, listening, echocore.io, ECHOCORE.io, and you can get there, check it out, mint your NFT, and get involved. Read more about the roadmap. And again, follow Doug and check out his blog. Lots of great thought leadership and insight into the space. James, any questions or thoughts as we're wrapping up?
The only question I had was one that Doug's already pretty much answered, and it was just about future-proofing NFTs and meta-based projects at this point for that kind of distributed system of returns that he talks about, hopefully being employed in the future. Have you got any advice for up-and-coming projects on how they might start thinking about their endeavors as a business that is future-proofed?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess, I think one of the things we've learned, because I may have been in a metaverse for 15 years, but Web3 is still new. And it's new to all of us, by the way. Like NFT, the Bored Apes drop, that was only a year ago, which is pretty crazy. This market has exploded in a very, very short period of time. So you're an NFT OG if you owned an NFT like a year ago. That's the kind of time horizons. And I think one of the big things we've learned is truly the value of partnerships, and that we're all in this together. And I think the more that you can collaborate, the way to future-proof is to look for ways to collaborate with other people, because we're all, we've all got to figure this out together. And one of the things that's amazing to me is that it doesn't matter who the project is. Pretty much everybody, there's no big walls. I think this is a community where all of the projects are looking to stay open and to stay alive to new experiences. So I think the future proofing comes from community wisdom at this point, to be honest.
And it's interesting the similarity between what you're saying and what we saw in layer one projects, where for a long period of time they were siloed and they couldn't communicate with each other. And now we're seeing these bridges come up, and what an experience it's led to. So yeah, I think that's great advice. Community projects should build communities together, and they should learn how to link their projects with one another.
Yeah, I was going to say great plug opportunity for StoryPrima. You mentioned Legends of Cypher a couple times, Doug, which is our own NFT project to try and bring a massive universe to life. And, we found it difficult to, I don't want to say compete, because we're not in competition, as you said. It's very much learning and open environments. But we were, struggling for the minds and hearts and attention of audience that, have thousands and thousands of NFT projects to choose from. And, hundreds of them provide speculative growth opportunities and not a lot of depth of lore. They provide art and community and some storytelling in their own rights, but we didn't find there was a lot of space for really deep lore, universe-built stories. Some are successful, some are burgeoning. And so that's why we started StoryPrima, and this podcast is a way to shine a light on those projects and those communities. And certainly with StoryPrima, the goal is to provide some glue, some opportunity to create community of practice and learn from each other. So want to thank you so much for your time and being one of our early guests on the show. You've agreed to help us and stay in touch with us as we build out Legends of Cypher. And certainly we consider you a core member of the StoryPrima community as we evolve our practices and products there, which are all designed to help grow story-based projects like ours. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Amazing chat, guys. Loved it.
Yeah. I do have two closing questions for a bit of fun. I asked them of all the guests, so if you've seen any past shows, you would know it. It's funner if you haven't, and they're a surprise. So I'll start with number one. NFTs, do we think they're a fad or enduring?
Yeah, I think they're enduring. Yeah, absolutely. I think they're enduring, and they won't look anything like they do today a year from now.
Right.
I get super excited. Like, I don't know if you saw Richie Hutton just released a collaborative NFT. I can't remember the name of the artist, but it's a piece of music and art where the NFT, actually, you would never hear the song the same way. So the song changes, lives on the blockchain. It'll live there forever in theory. It's programmed right on the blockchain. So this is an NFT that if you buy it today, you know, a year from now, it's a completely different song. It's a completely different piece of art. So I think there's something, you know, super intriguing about thinking of NFTs that way. I would love to, I mean, this is just kind of a little dream side project, but NFTs that, you know, have super long time frames, thinking of kind of like deep time. Imagine releasing a story collection that changes, for example, based on, I don't know, world news or weather, but the story shifts, but it only shifts once a year. And you buy this NFT knowing that it's going to take 10 years to get to the end of the story. I think that's the kind of stuff that's possible because of the blockchain. Yeah,
we're certainly seeing a ton of examples of innovation in NFTs, and, you know, the immutable natures, while kind of denotes the idea of static and locked in. We're seeing that these are dynamic, machine run and human influenced pieces of technology that can kind of have a life on their own. Yeah, I
think they'll get renamed, though, to be honest. I think somebody's going to put a little twist on it and then rename it.
Yeah.
Right. So that, and it'll just kind of be rebranded here somewhere along the way, but it'll still essentially be the same thing.
Yeah, agreed. Probably should happen soon, because could definitely use a rebranding. I'm an old marketing guy, so I know that stuff works. So yeah, and with things of the past, there's a bad taste in many people's mouths, and a rebranding sometimes helps with that. So last question for you, Doug. You know, we both talked about you know, decentralized storytelling, community-based storytelling. So how long, in your opinion, how many months, years do you think before decentralized autonomous organization or a Web3 community is up on the stage at a mainstream award ceremony like the Academy Awards or Emmys or Grammys, accepting an award for their NFT-based story project?
I'm going to say 3 years.
3 years.
Maybe less.
Wow.
Yeah, I know some projects now that are Hollywood level, total Hollywood level.
Yeah.
And I could actually see them being nominated within the next 18 months.
Yeah. It's funny you said 3 years, that you're the third guest to pick the 3-year mark. And all with all with a sort of a, you know, some knowledge about some projects that are kind of coming to life that have a good run at it. So yeah, I'm starting to believe it's true. Love it. All right. Well, thank you again, Doug, for your time. It's been a ton of fun. We've learned a lot. I know the audience is really going to appreciate hearing from you. And yeah, we'll be in touch to collaborate more and learn from each other. So with that, I'll close the podcast and say thank you.
Thank you.